Good morning. Welcome to the mayor and fellow councillors, admin staff, anybody in the gallery, and viewers on Zoom and YouTube. Today it's August 25th, 2026, 9:30 a.m. This is the meeting of the Committee of the Whole of the Municipality of Jasper Council, and I call the meeting to order at 9:30. Are there any additions to the agenda? Any councillors? Councillor Waxer.
Thank you. I would like to propose that we move item 7.4, Indigenous Relations Strategy, to an in-camera discussion prior to, as it's an important strategy, and that is something that we would, strategies are something we would normally do in camera prior to bringing it public.
Is that something that requires a motion? Yes. Any comments or discussions on that motion? Mayor Ireland?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Roger. I will support Councillor Waxer in that motion. Strategies typically are something that we develop in camera. Ultimately, of course, they have to come to this table at a public meeting for approval, but our strategic priorities, for example, go through a range of in-camera discussions until council comes to a sense of comfort before they are made public. I think that an Indigenous relations strategy is at least equal in scope to our strategic priorities and should easily follow the same process. So I will vote in favor of Councillor Waxer's motion to discuss that first in an in-camera session.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other comments of that subject? No, could we have a motion then?
I think my motion is that we move item 7.4, Indigenous Relations Strategy, to an in-camera discussion.
Okay, all in favor? Appears to be unanimous. That's carried. Any other additions to the agenda? No? Okay. Need to approve the agenda then for August 25th, 2026. Can we have a motion for that? Councillor Hall? All those in favor? Appears to be unanimous. That's carried. The August 11th Committee of the Whole meeting minutes. Is there any business arising from those minutes? Appears to be none. Do we have a motion approving those minutes then? They've been approved. That's right. Okay. Next is delegations. Do we have any delegations today? Not appear to be any. This is correspondence, the RCMP quarterly report. Is anybody here to speak to that matter? CAO given.
Deputy Mayor Roger, there is no presentation intended with this. This is a matter of routine business. The RCMP provide these reports on a quarterly basis, as the name suggests, but it's really a statistical sampling of the activity at the detachment, which provides a comparison between previous years. And I think that they have in past reports, although maybe not in this one, compared to provincial averages. But so you can see the change in caseload and different types of offenses and activities from the RCMP, as well as a description of the staffing at the detachment. And so on page 13 of the total package, you'll see that the detachment has a total of 9 regular member positions established, so 9 RCMP positions, 8 of which are filled, and there's 1 hard vacancy as it's described in the report. So again, this is really just a matter of tracking. It's not that there's a particular issue. Administration wouldn't identify any of the particular trends here as something that needs further follow-up, but it's provided for council's information so you can keep a sense of how the activity at the detachment is going over the long term.
Okay, thank you. Before we move forward, going back to delegations, I was asked to read something for the benefit of the public, just so that they know that the council is always ready to receive delegations. And the delegation portion of our agenda is where any member of the community come forward to address council any topic that's on the agenda. So in future, if there's anybody that wishes to speak to any matter, they can certainly come forward, and there's a spot for them to do so. The next matter is, Mayor Ireland.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Roger. Just before you leave, the correspondence section of the agenda, the quarterly report, two matters arise. I wonder whether administration could confirm and report back to council, confirm with Sergeant Bedesi, just a couple of details that I should have asked in all the years that quarterly reports have been coming before us. But I assumed that the record of crime statistics actual, beginning on page 14, is based on reports or complaints rather than charges. And there could be a difference, of course, because there could be complaint of a theft and no one to charge. So I'd like to have that confirmed. And then confirmation whether under property offenses, which have gone up compared to previous years, whether any part of that or what part of that relates to theft from construction sites. Because anecdotally, I have heard several, at least allegations of theft from active construction sites, which is not only a loss to builders, it delays people who are already vulnerable. It's so reprehensible. And if it's happening, I would like to know. And if it's happening, I would also like to know whether the RCMP have any sort of strategy to do more patrols or otherwise deal with the issue. It does affect not just the financial welfare of people involved, it affects emotionally the people who are involved and have their bill delayed because stuff was stolen from construction sites. So if that could be passed on to Sergeant Bedesi, I would appreciate knowing what's happening from the perspective of the RCMP.
Okay, thank you. Is anything else regarding correspondence? Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Roger. And through you, I wonder if we could have administration ask Sergeant Bedesi if there's any update as to the hard vacancy. This report is dated the 30th of June, and we are fast approaching September. And I'm just wondering if there's been any movement for that hard vacancy to be replaced and when we might anticipate another officer coming to the community.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Melnick. Perhaps would that be something appropriate for administration to be asking? Okay, thank you. Anything else on correspondence? Mayor Ireland.
If there is not, Deputy Mayor Roger, I will make a motion that committee receive the RCMP quarterly report as information.
Okay, all those in favor? Appears to be unanimous. It's carried. Any other correspondence matters? No. Going on then to new business. The first one is 7.1, rescinding policy F008. I understand that a bylaw has now been passed that supersedes the policy, and so is it Director Nadal to speak to this? Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Roger. Indeed, that is more of a housekeeping item. Now that council has passed the bylaw for encroachments, this is just a housekeeping step that we need to rescind the old one so there's no confusion. Rescind the old policy, which has now been superseded by bylaw. So this is committee recommend council with the formal decision to come at a regular meeting.
Thank you, Director. Is there any discussion or comments on that matter? There being none, would one councillor like to make a motion then, please? Councillor Waxer.
That committee recommend council rescind policy F008 encroachments.
Thank you. Any discussion on that motion? No? If we could have the vote then. All in favor? It appears to be unanimous. It's carried. Next matter is 7.2, access to information and protection of privacy. Again, Director Nadeau.
Thank you. As the report is titled, this is about the Access to Information Act and Protection of Privacy Act, which are provincial legislation that was changed in 2025. And there was a period given to municipalities to become in compliance. And as the report suggests, we are requesting two things of council. The first, that committee recommend council give first and second reading to the Access to Information and Protection of Privacy bylaw. And then the other item, that committee recommend council approve the privacy management program as presented. So these two items represent the basic legislative compliance steps that we need to take as a municipality to become in compliance with the two acts, which replace the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, which was in place for a number of years, like 20 plus years. That program hadn't really changed a lot. But then the introduction of the Access to Information Act, which captures a lot of what people might understand what FOIP was previously. So requesting information from the municipality that is public, and therefore we, operating as a public body, have to release it unless there's an exception in the legislation. So that hasn't really changed. It's just become its own separate act. The Protection of Privacy Act, however, introduces a lot more complexities and a much more robust program to make sure that public bodies, so this applies to municipalities, but it also applies to school boards and all kinds of public bodies in the province. That protection of privacy aspect has really more stringent requirements, and is partially due to the age of information we're in with technology probably, but also potentially serious incidents with the release of information. So you can imagine, releasing your email address is one thing, but releasing your banking information is another, or biometric information or things like that, is what the province is trying to increase the protection. So in a nutshell, the bylaw that we're proposing to get us into compliance with the current legislation, the municipality has to appoint a head of the organization as per the legislation, and that has to be done by bylaw. That person is the CAO, who can further delegate items to people in the organization, but we have to do that by bylaw. And setting fees is the other thing that the bylaw does. So the bylaw pretty much says we will charge the fees for service that are stated in the act. So the bylaw in itself is pretty straightforward, does those two things, appoints the head, allows us to charge fees. And those are the only two things that need to be done by bylaw. The rest of the items largely are encompassed in the privacy management program. I apologize for the size of the attachment and the detail involved in that document. We hired Brownlee lawyers to help us come up with that document. Lots of Alberta municipalities are doing the same because, as you can see from the document itself that's attached to the report, the requirements are quite rigorous, and there are several of them. And so in the regulations, but also in the Act, this privacy management program is the bulk of what we need to do in order to get in compliance. So as you can imagine, that privacy management program lays out the framework that we need to establish. We are not currently resourced to make it happen, as in we can reach basic compliance on a few items which were already existing under FOIP and that we continue to expand within current resourcing. But for example, assigning security categories to every record that has personal information. So depending on what information is in there, what kind of security level is assigned to it, and therefore what kind of protection measures need to be in place, that's a pretty big endeavor across the organization. So we currently are not resourced to do that, but we are working towards compliance. And you'll see that the privacy management program, the recommended motion is that, or the recommendation is that committee recommend council approve the privacy management program as presented. It is on policy template in the attachment on the report. The advice we got from the lawyers is that council has to approve the privacy management program. Does it have to be a policy? It was presented to us in policy format, so one makes the assumption that that's what's recommended. But also, you'll also see that the motion says we just need a resolution that says council approves the privacy management program. Whether it becomes a municipal policy as we know it in its current format or not is maybe up for debate. It is not bylaw material. It does not have to be included in a bylaw, but it's also kind of a departure from our normal policies. There's a lot of detail in there that arguably would be more of an admin procedure type document. CEO Given and myself went back and forth a fair bit on how to present this to council, but essentially the substance of the document as you see it is the privacy management program. Council could solely pass a motion that says you approve the privacy management program and not necessarily assign it a policy number, or the alternative being just treat it as a policy as we would with other ones. So we're open to hearing your thoughts on that, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Nadon. One quick question for me before we start with the councillors. Can you advise if this is more or less word for word the same program that every other municipality and that deals with Brownlee is getting?
Thank you for the question, Deputy Mayor Roger. We did have to do some preliminary work with them and fill out a questionnaire and really determine the size and scope and the types of documents that the municipality of Jasper works with. So it is customized in that aspect, but I suspect that they have a template that they work with. I don't suspect this is very unique to the municipality, but also all these sections in there are all relating to a section of the Act, right? So if you look at privacy management programs from community to community, there should be some consistencies.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any comments or questions for Director Nadon? Mayor Ireland.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Roger. You might have anticipated questions. Following directly from Deputy Mayor Rogers' question, on the basis that this is likely a template of some sort, do you have any understanding of where the municipality of Jasper stands in relation to progress compared to other communities? Because it seems to me with the volume of material, if there are many communities looking at this, we might be well advised to wait till the dust settles to see whether others pick out issues that are going to require changes. It is a complex, difficult document to read and understand. And although the legislation says we must appoint or designate a person, is there a timeline? Do we have an ability to take our time on this and see how other communities respond to the privacy management program document? So that's the general question overall.
Deputy Mayor Roger, for Mayor Ireland. So the legislation was passed in 2025 and coming into force was earlier this spring. So we are not in compliance with the legislation as of today. I would say that there are many other municipalities that are also not yet in compliance. So I don't feel particularly bad about that, but I also don't like being not complying with the law of the land. And so Director Nadon and I have discussed how can we start to come into compliance. And the first steps in that are passing a bylaw and passing a privacy management program as presented here. So those are the first steps. The implementation and sort of adaptation and ramping up to the full program and the implementation of the program would be the next steps that would follow. So Mayor Ireland, your question is, do we have the ability to not do this today and wait and see how the dust settles? I guess it really depends on council's level of risk tolerance about how long you think it's reasonable to be not in compliance with a provincial law that is in force. And, would I expect that somebody would show up on a doorstep and say, hey, you're not in compliance? No, probably not. I think there's lots of other municipalities that are facing that as well. Do I think it's good practice to knowingly choose not to comply with a law that's in force? No, I wouldn't advise that. It is highly technical. There is the matter of the effort, the level of effort of implementation, and so those two factors. On the first, on the technicality, I would say this would be an area where I wouldn't invite wordsmithing. This is where we intentionally went to a firm that deals with many municipalities. And so the cost of developing this highly detailed document was spread across all those municipalities. That firm can share that document that is legislatively compliant across all their different customers. So we benefit from that. In terms of the implementation, we will take our time on that, but we can demonstrate to anybody who came knocking that we've complied with the intent of the law by passing the documents that were required, and that ramping up operationally may take some more time.
All right, thank you for that. Just for clarity, I think it's understood here, but in the third paragraph of the discussion in the request for decision document, that last sentence just ends, but I take it that it was intended to end with the words that the material presented here was drafted by council, right?
Correct, Mayor Ireland.
I think administration deserves that degree of distance. So I don't have issues much with the bylaw. I was surprised in the definition section that it is not in alphabetical order. I don't know in whose alphabet municipality becomes later than Papa and province, but whatever, we could deal with that. And it's a short bylaw. It does the requirement. It designates the head. I did have a question about 6.2, if anybody here is able to understand, although that again was drafted, I take it by council. But it ends with the phrase that it is for the purposes of fees payable under this bylaw. So it's a limited purpose. So what it says that when there's a request that hasn't been fulfilled, the fees, if it's outstanding, the fees now become subject to this. But for no other purpose, and I'm wondering particularly if there is an outstanding request, if the rules of the new legislation are at all different, is it only the fees that matter? Does the process say for timelines, does that change? It just seems to be an oddly worded section to me.
Deputy Mayor Roger, through to Mayor Ireland, there is not an outstanding request. We don't have a request that's active, and that would fall in that category. So that sort of simplifies the matter. And it specifically targets access to information. So this would be more the type of request that we were used to seeing under freedom of information legislation, not so much a protection of privacy complaint, like there was a breach in privacy. I understand your point. And like we said, that this has been drafted by legal counsel, so we didn't really question it too far, but there is no current request. So I guess that kind of takes care of it right there.
Well, that does. And I mean, in fairness, lawyers who have practiced in this town don't make mistakes, but others might. Looking at the, whatever it is, the privacy management program, there is no definition of collection. And because the program applies to councillors, I wonder whether it's important to understand what collection means. So if you receive an email from a constituent or another person, I suppose, have you, under the terms of the program, collected that information? Perhaps it's intended to mean where we are requesting information to compile, but I don't know what collection means, but I do understand that council is to be captured by this program. And if I can find it, as you indicated, it's very long, but I made some notes. I think it's in section 10 that I have some concerns. So in section 10.1.2, specifically references council members are prohibited from using personal automated systems, including artificial intelligence tools. And I don't for the life of me know what that means. But as an example, before I read this, I had done what I thought was a Google search to find out about how many municipalities in Alberta have a business tax bylaw. And the response I got from my Google search was from artificial intelligence. Am I authorized to do that? That was something I was doing in my role as a councillor. This suggests that I need authorization from the CAO or the privacy head in order to make use of artificial intelligence. And that cannot be what's intended, but I sure don't understand that section. And how do I then comply with this policy? And I think there is, if you can bear with me, I think there was one more that I itemized. Oh, there are a couple. 12.2.5. And this has to do with, I think your earlier comment, I think, Director Nadon, was that we are not necessarily resourced yet to manage how this might go. But we have to do these updates regularly, whatever regularly might mean. There is a concluding section somewhere toward the end of the document that says we have to review this policy, I think every 2 years and then every 3 years or something like that. So is that intended to be the regularity of the update, or do we have any idea what sort of capacity issues are going to be challenges for our own team to manage to keep the regular updates that this document requires?
Deputy Mayor Roger, through to Mayor Ireland, thank you for the questions, and thank you for your attention to detail and for reviewing the document thoroughly. It helps us put it into perspective and look towards implementation. I'll start with 12.2.5 because that's where I'm at on my screen. I believe that updated regularly, technical safeguards are updated regularly. So that means information technology safeguards. So one of the main areas where hackers can get in is outdated software or outdated protection systems that information technology might have. So there is a huge information technology component to this. As you can imagine, we used to do business on paper quite a bit. We've moved away from that significantly, and now most things are online. So this framework actually impacts our IT department a fair bit. And I think the technical safeguards recommended here to be updated regularly are specifically in the context of information technologies. You raise a good point about the privacy management program itself and how often it needs to be updated and kept current and revised, and that is part of the resourcing question, and that is a legislative or privacy item. So maybe it is worth noting the difference of the day-to-day work that currently happens in legislative services is quite different than privacy management, is a whole other aspect that technically is or usually is handled by legislative services, but it's really a different topic altogether that could be addressed differently. And that's a different question altogether. When it comes to artificial intelligence, so back to your question about you did what you thought was a Google search and then it rendered some AI information back. Our IT department is actually it has to mandate or is supposed to give us a list of approved AI tools. So you're not supposed to go and get a subscription for an artificial intelligence tool that no one really knows about and hasn't been vetted, and then you input information in there, and that brings some risk to the organization. So that is more of an information technology aspect again, but as a municipality, we should have approved AI tools, and those are the ones you can use, and those ones only, kind of thing. What this framework and privacy management program addresses specifically is the use of personal information in those AI tools is what is intended in this document specifically. So for example, you've received an email from a constituent and you want to, I don't know, imagine it's a really long email and you want to summarize it. So you're popping it into AI to get a summary. You should make sure that you don't include the person's email address or the person's phone number that might have been included. So this framework specifically speaks to personal information, and namely inputting it in artificial intelligence is one of those thresholds when we worked with the consultants that if your organization has a lot of AI tools, you need a more robust AI policy with regards to privacy management versus if mostly what people use it for is to summarize documents or to do some basic research, then you don't need very detailed AI policies, if you will, to govern our activities under the new legislation. So this is all specifically relating to personal information. And actually, there was an option in the area that says that we have to apply some different security levels to different types of information. There were two options that were proposed. We went with the simpler option, which is we have to establish those levels to documents that include personal information. The alternative was all documents of the municipality of Jasper be subject to these security levels, which scope-wise we felt was a lot. Maybe it would be the best practice to apply it to all municipal documents, but we also felt like maybe that's not something we can actually address realistically in the next period of time.
CEO Given.
Yeah, Deputy Mayor Roger, for Mayor Island and for all of council, as you've noted, this is highly detailed. It is a significant change. So the FOIP side of it, the freedom of information side, and people being able to access public information, as Director Nadon said, is pretty well understood and not significantly changed. The protection of personal information is a substantial change. Is really, when FOIP came in, it was a big deal in the early 2000s. Everybody, oh wow, big adjustment for municipalities. We are entering a time of a similarly significant adjustment for all types of public entities, as we all have to adjust to this new requirement to have better safeguards for the protection of personal information. And there's going to be a lot of adjustment over the next number of years with respect to that. So I think the fair question, I think maybe is what's this going to look like for implementation? And my answer to that would be all of us in Alberta, all municipalities in Alberta are a part of this process of evolution and figuring that out. But the first step is to ensure that we're complying with the letter of the law. And then the next step is figuring out how we operationally comply and implement it. And there'll be a number of next steps that will come as a result of this. The discussion around the use of AI and guidance around that. We've already been discussing a corporate policy or working with IT and providing that guidance to staff and council. That's another one of those steps along the path. There is no suggestion from administration that upon passage of the privacy management program and the bylaw that will be done. There will be a lot of further steps to come, most of them operational. Some of them council would see, given that you are representatives and sort of are within the scope of the privacy management program. And so we'll ensure that as we go along and as things evolve, we'll inform council about actions that you need to be aware of or steps that you need to take or limitations. We don't have all those today.
Thank you, CEO Gibbon. My comment would be, I agree with that totally. I think that we should be passing the bylaw, knowing that if this same wording is out there amongst, dozens of municipalities, that there's going to be all kinds of comments coming through and corrections, and that perhaps what will happen is Brownlee, after a few months, will gather together the package and suggest these are the changes that should be done and do it everywhere. I'm not sure that sending individual corrections to administration from the council is going to be the way to go here. So, Mayor Ireland.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Roger. My hope would be that, though, in a like setting in other municipalities, this same discussion is happening, and we can record where we have uncertainty about provisions. Those can all be provided to Brownlee, and so they have a sense from a number of communities what the issues are. I'm not suggesting that our administration make the changes, but record where we have a level of uncertainty or discomfort so that Brownlee has something to work from. But if I can add one more concern under 14.1.2, that deals with mandatory training. And that includes council members. And again, the word collection, which is undefined, is there. So, and also we will be involved, I think, in the protection of personal information. I think we have to be. There are requirements following that new training, or pardon me, training for new employees has to happen within 3 months of the start. For existing employees, it's within 6 months of enactment of this protection or this privacy management plan. It's silent as to volunteers, except that volunteers are mentioned earlier. So I don't know when we're supposed to train volunteers, and I don't know how we figure that out, and I don't know where the capacity comes from to do all of that. But the clock starts ticking as soon as we approve this this program. And there are sharper eyes than mine out in the province, and they will have found other things that may subject municipalities that approve this now to all sorts of repercussions. And if the changes don't come until much later, we've already expended the resources doing stuff. So I am hesitant to approve this too quickly, because it seems that it would be a benefit to not only our council, but all councils who are looking at this, to flesh it out a little bit better first through Brownlee, so we know where we stand. Otherwise, if there are changes to mandatory training that come later, and we've already expended the resources doing the training, we can't get that back. And I don't know what those expenses might be.
Deputy Mayor Roger for Mayor Ireland. This is absolutely a topic of discussion across municipalities. It's been a matter of advocacy for AB Munis for the past year since the legislation passed. I think there was a recognition that this was going to be a significant and costly change for municipalities. And it's a good example of how provincial rules and regulations increase the cost of doing business for municipalities. I mean, that's just the flat out fact. And so the province has passed new legislation in 2025, I think, when reasonably Jasper Municipal Council and administration were focused on other more localized and important matters. I think a lot of other municipalities across the province were raising the alarm about these essentially downloaded costs or added costs to municipal operations. The legislation still stands. So absolutely, prior to 2021, prior to 2001, the early 2000s, the position of FOIP coordinator didn't exist. The demands on the legislative services type department of a municipality at that time were keep meeting minutes, ensure that those documents are held, and that's kind of about it. I'm probably grossly oversimplifying, but I think it's fair to say that following the early 2000s and the passage of FOIP legislation, that world became a lot more complex, and the demands on municipal administrations increased. I think we're at a point now with POPA where we're seeing the same sort of thing of a step change in demands on municipal administration. So Mayor Ireland, you're exactly right. There are costs and operation, of training in all sorts of areas. And I think that that's something that municipalities across the province have been very concerned about. And the legislation is in force, and the effective date was earlier this spring. And so we have a bit of a choice about whether we express our displeasure by refusing to come into compliance with the legislation, or take another approach of coming into minimum compliance and then taking our time as resources allow to come fully compliant with implementation. And I think that's the same situation that a lot of municipalities find themselves in.
Director Nadeau.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Rogers. If I may add to that, larger municipalities in Alberta have become compliant with this program some time ago. I'd say smaller municipalities that have less resources, and Jasper is maybe, middle of the pack. Like we're not a big one, but we're not an entity that has a CAO and an admin assistant only. There are some, again, I'm oversimplifying, but there are some communities in Alberta that are not equipped to be dealing with this whatsoever. So we're somewhere in the middle. There are lots of communities that are already compliant, that have adopted these programs and bylaws, and that have in fact recruited privacy coordinators. The Alberta Municipal Clerks Association job board has been filled with job postings for privacy coordinators for the last 6 months to a year. So those communities are investing in becoming compliant with the legislation, and that is an aspect where clearly council has a say, and CO Given is responsible for determining what type of resourcing and what level would be appropriate. We're not quite there yet. This is the foundational documents that will get us there. And for example, on the training aspect specifically, we're already compliant with whatever is in the privacy management program here, as in we've found the appropriate training, we've integrated it into our health and safety program, and every single employee who starts with the municipality of Jasper has to complete access to information and protection of privacy training. That has happened as of about 2 months ago. So does it meet fully the intent of the legislation and address the needs of someone who is regularly dealing with personal information? Maybe not. But the basic requirement that all municipal staff need to take this training has already been, that box has been ticked. So there's different measures of compliance. There's different amounts of compliance we can work towards. Like CO Given said, this is an effort to be in basic compliance. So we're demonstrating that we're not ignoring the legislation, and we are working towards implementing a program.
Thank you. Thank you, Director. Any other comments from Council? Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Roger, and through you to I'll say administration regarding the training aspect again. And I'm comforted to know that the mandatory training for new employees covering the basic FOIP requirement is already occurring. Reading through the mandatory training for employees besides councillors, it appears that the mandatory training is a lot more diligent for those individuals who are regularly dealing with sensitive material. And my question would be, there was in the request for decision, there was a comment about the financial implications that might occur, and we anticipate that would be coming to us at budget. Besides the addition of an additional, probably, I'm going to use the incorrect term here. So we have the privacy officer, and then we have the privacy manager. So I have got those correct? The head, privacy head, and then probably we don't have a privacy officer. You had mentioned a term which I didn't see in the document called privacy coordinator. Might be something else that we'd be looking at, plus the training, which for council and for others would have to be incurred. Will the budget presentation be fairly robust as to that, or is that something that'll be rolled out over in to the spirit of what we're trying to do over a couple of budget years?
Deputy Mayor Roger for Councillor Melnick. So there's some part of this that's, that sort of is just additive, inflationary to general operations. What administration is doing right now is discussing and deciding how extensive this is, given all the other changes, that have happened to municipal governance over the last number of years and council strategic priorities, all those things. So I think it's fair to say that you can expect some specific discussion about the implications of these legislative changes on municipal operations at the budget. If council wanted to refer, wanted to be a bit more specific and direct administration to present those changes as a specific item in the budget, you could do that so that you could know that it's being tracked and would be called out and specifically discussed. I don't think you necessarily need to do that because we're already well aware that this has a resource implication, and we're planning on bringing for and highlighting that for you when we come to budget. With respect to the privacy coordinator position, I think that's just a term that other municipalities have identified. That's not a legislated term that comes up. It's the privacy head, I think, is the one that's required in the bylaw. That would be me in the context of the bylaw. And I do have the ability to delegate authorities and responsibilities sort of further to that once council passes the bylaw.
Okay,
Thank you for that.
The comments from council. Mayor Ireland.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Roger. Just one other area that was mentioned in your opening comments, Director Nadon, and that is whether this is a policy as it has been presented or a resolution to approve a program. From administration's perspective, does it make any difference, particularly in terms of amendment? So I appreciate that if it was a bylaw, then there is a standard that's required to be made to amend a bylaw. This is not a bylaw. Would there be a difference, though, if it was a policy in the way that we would make changes to it as opposed to if it was just a resolution? Because I anticipate that over time, this document will be refined, presumably many times. And so looking forward, what is the most efficacious way to make changes going forward? Is it through policy, or would it be better that we just have a resolution saying council adopt this program or approve the program?
Deputy Mayor Roger to Mayor Ireland, I think CAO Given and I have consensus that approving a program is probably, so that council approved the privacy management program probably gives us what we're looking for. And you should have heard the conversations between myself and our legislative coordinator when I asked her to put this on policy letterhead, and she was like, well, but it doesn't have the sections, and it doesn't have this, and it doesn't have that, right? And a lot of the technical information would usually be found in admin procedures is kind of where it's at. So it's a bit of an odd one. And based on the legal counsel we received and the recommendation that I naturally put in the report, I think that council approved the privacy management program. Let's not confuse things by calling it a policy, I think is the way to go. And in terms of future amendments, as you suggested, Mayor Ireland, it's not a bylaw. It's not something that requires 3 readings, but it's something that would require a committee of the whole discussion and a council resolution to amend, which in itself is very similar to how we would amend a policy. But so definitely privacy management program, period.
Okay, thank you, Director Nadal. Any other discussion or comments? If not, is anybody prepared to make the motion? Mayor Ireland?
I'm prepared to make a motion that committee recommend council give first and second reading to the Access to Information and Protection of Privacy bylaw.
Any discussion regarding that motion? If not, all those in favor? Appears to be unanimous. It's carried. The second part of the recommended motion, does anybody prepared to make that motion? Nobody's prepared to make the motion? I'm not sure what the procedure is. We just put it in abeyance and go on to the next topic.
Deputy Mayor Roger, we don't have a ability to put a motion in abeyance. I guess at the council table, the way to do that would be to defer consideration of a topic to a later date, or simply to take no action on that item. In this case, that would mean that the municipality has passed the bylaw, but does not have a council-approved privacy management program. Having a council-approved privacy management program is a requirement of the legislation.
Okay. Well, if nobody's prepared to make the motion, Councillor Waxer.
Make the motion and we'll see what debate arises. That committee recommend council approve the privacy management program as presented.
Thank you, Councillor Waxer. Do we have any discussion or comments on that motion? Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Roger, and I appreciate that we've had a fairly robust conversation about a very, very complicated privacy management program. And in the conversation and discussion with administration, I believe I heard that this will be something that'll be referred to or up for review periodically, or with changes that may be found in the province that other municipalities are finding that their legislation needed some adjustment. And from what I understand, that we could do those changes to the privacy management program in a two-step process, which would be coming to the committee of the whole to then discuss the changes and then referring the changes, if there are, to a regular council meeting. Am I following the procedure correctly?
That's right, Councillor Malik.
Any other discussion on the motion? Mayor Ireland.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Roger. The concern that I have had is to weigh being out of compliance against the possibility of being in breach. So we can make ourselves be in compliance with the legislation that says we have to have a privacy management program. But as soon as we do that, there is a risk that we either will be or will shortly become in breach of that program, in part because, at least from my personal perspective, I don't quite understand what the requirements on me are, and I might inadvertently be in breach of the very things that are prohibited, because I don't understand what's going on with authority to use AI, for example, or AI tools. And so it's easy to walk ourselves into breach, and is that worse than being out of compliance? So the law says we have to have this, and we're already behind on that. But as soon as we do it, then we have to comply with whatever it is we pass, which is equally problematic. In all the circumstances, I can understand why the recommendation is before us and the advantage to administration in having eventually council approve the privacy management program. I think I am at a place now where I've convinced myself that I can vote in favor of Councillor Waxer's motion and then present another motion that we can debate later when I make it, but in essence directing administration to pass along to Brownlee concerns that we have with respect to this privacy management program in the hopes that they collect similar concerns from other municipalities for whom they act and present some opportunities and recommendations for changes so that we can, over time, get better clarity about how we actually comply with our own program, because it's still a mystery to me. So the end of that long discussion, I will vote in favor of the motion.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor.
I'm just curious, like, if we don't vote in favor of this, are we leaving administration out, hanging out to dry? Like, I mean, what's the repercussions on them if they, you know, need it and don't have it? Possibly a question for you, CEO Given.
Deputy Mayor Rogers. So I think from an administrative perspective, we would benefit from having a program approved by council that we can start to build out our systems around. In the absence of an approved program, administration has to come up from scratch, or maybe working from the document that's here, build out the operational systems to be able to support that. But it does mean that you don't know what we're building. You don't know the framework that we're building around or to. And we don't know if what we're building is in alignment with what your expectations would be. So having the program provides guidance to administration on what we're supposed to be doing. And it is guidance that's visible to council and the community, so that if and when it needs to be adjusted, council is the body that's in control of those adjustments, and you can see it. In the absence of that, administration would attempt to build out, our response and our systems to be able to comply with the intent of the legislation. We'd probably do that based on best practice, but council wouldn't be the ones that have authorized that. And it would reduce the clarity for council about what the program actually looks like. And so I think from an administrative perspective, we always appreciate additional clarity where there's something that's authorized by council that gives us our marching orders. Having marching orders is not the same as how fast or how slow. And when it comes to budget time and, administration identifying the operational implications and costs of this and saying, hey, here's what we think it will take for us to go quickly on this topic, and council says, well, that's a little bit too quickly, we're not ready for that. That's a different discussion. But understanding the framework and the plan allows administration to build up a response to that plan in a logical way. In the absence of a plan, we'll do our best.
The comment I've got is that which is worse, is to have no bylaw or to have a privacy management program that we haven't passed. So if we have the bylaw set up, I mean, if the privacy management program is something that we find we don't like in the future, we can change that, can we not? Although we have to be careful we don't contravene the law.
So we have the first motion passed to recommend that council approve the bylaw. That's one step along coming into compliance. So, step one, pass a bylaw on its way to council for consideration. Step two, council approve a privacy management program. That's the discussion right now. And then steps 3 and beyond are implementation. And so eventually the municipality will need to have a privacy management program adopted and approved by council. I think it's understood that this is an area of practice that's likely to evolve. I don't believe that the province expects that privacy management programs will be fixed and never adapt and evolve over time. I think that's understood that that will be that will happen. So I guess it really is up to council. Deputy Mayor Roger, is it better to have something in place that can demonstrate that we've made an attempt to become compliant with the legislation and that we're working on implementation? I guess from my perspective, I would say yes, that's probably ideal. But if council has some hesitancy and isn't ready to move there and is okay with the risk of explicitly choosing not to pass a privacy management program, then that's certainly within your right.
I guess my follow-up question is that if we do pass it, we can change it just with the council motion sometime in the future.
That's correct, Deputy Mayor Roger.
Well, with that, I would be in favor of passing it as well. And if there's something about it we don't like, if, for example, it requires more employees than we think are necessary, and you don't need that many to comply with the act, then we can make those changes. So my opinion would be we should pass it. Do we have any other comments from council? Councillor Melnick?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Roger, and I will vote in favor of the motion regarding that council approve the privacy management program as presented. We're at a point where we're end of August. It won't come back to us for third reading until sometime at the end of September. At that point, we'll be looking at budgets and starting to be working into the new year. So I think time is of the essence here. By delaying this much longer, we'll be into the new year. And while we're not yet in compliance, we will be yet further in the future not in compliance. At least we'll have a document that we can have administration work on, the policies, procedures, the staffing, the budgets that we would need to be able to look at and approve when we look at things in October and November.
Okay, thank you for the comments. Any other comments from council? Is anybody prepared to make the motion? The motion's already been made, I'm sorry. We'll have the vote. All those in favor? Appears to be unanimous. It's carried. Mayor Ireland.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Roger. Before we leave the topic, we've had a lengthy discussion about particularly the PMP this morning. And I would like it to be captured and forwarded again in the hope that other municipalities will do the same. And our legal counsel, who is undoubtedly counsel for other municipalities, can collect information from all sorts of municipalities and use that to potentially review the template PMP and propose some changes. So my motion would be that Committee of the Whole direct administration to forward to Brownlee Law a list of the concerns regarding the privacy management program as expressed by committee members during the August 25th, 2026 Committee of the Whole meeting. That is the motion. The intent is simply to make sure that we have a record of our concerns, add those to concerns from other municipalities. And I think it is beyond question that there will be changes coming, but if we simply approve the PMP by resolution, we can easily change it in the future, and it'll probably happen more than once, but let's contribute with other municipalities to making a document that works better for all of us.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Ireland. I think we've discussed this quite a bit, but does anybody else have any comment on that? If not, can we have the vote then? All those in favor? It's unanimous. It's carried. Thank you. The next matter on our list is 7.3, the Jasper Municipal Leasehold Asset Society Transfer of Assets. And we have Director Nadal.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Roger, we've been working on this item for quite some time. We started in 2024 and had made some progress immediately before the wildfire, and then things sort of changed quickly. And we've since picked it up again. And so as you see, the recommendation in the report is that council direct administration. So we're not suggesting that this has to go to a regular meeting. So simply that committee direct administration to proceed with transferring assets from the Jasper Municipal Leasehold Assets Society to the Municipality of Jasper. So for those of you who are not familiar with the JMLAS, as we refer to it, there's a bit of information in the background. And in a nutshell, some community assets which were owned and operated by other entities were threatened to leave the community or not be in the control of community members anymore. So Mayor Ireland, I believe, at the time, came up with the idea of the JMLAS to keep those assets in the community and hold them in trust for what later became the Municipality of Jasper. So a number of assets that are functionally assets of the Municipality of Jasper, like the activity center, parking lots, certain parks, the Cottage Medical Clinic, the leases say Jasper Municipal Leasehold Assets Society on them. It doesn't say Municipality of Jasper. And the directors of the JMLAS are the elected officials for the Municipality of Jasper. So in your respective roles as councillors, the council before you were the directors of the JMLAS. The creation of the Jasper Municipal Housing Corporation has spurred discussions about the transfer of those assets. One, because the municipality has now been established for about 25 years, so there's some sense of comfort that the municipality is not going anywhere. As opposed to in the earlier days of municipal incorporation, there was not as much certainty. But also the housing corporation would benefit from having additional assets in its name for borrowing purposes and just as a management body for housing. The assets that are currently leased to third parties would ultimately transfer to the JMHC. So after speaking with our auditors and from a financial perspective, the first step is to take all of the JMLAS assets and transfer them to the Municipality of Jasper. Once that's done, only certain assets will get transferred a second time to the Municipal Housing Corporation. So the process that needs to unfold in order for this to take place is for the directors of the Leasehold Assets Society to sign a resolution, which we already have drafted by our lawyers. And by signing that resolution, you're essentially saying we are transferring the assets to, or assigning the leases is the correct terminology, to the Municipality of Jasper. And so this is not really a council decision. It's a Leasehold Assets Society decision. But we just wanted to make sure that council in this format, acting as committee, knows what's happening and is supportive of the JMLAS transferring its assets. So that's why the recommendation is worded as such in the report, that committee direct administration to proceed with the transfer, essentially. So we don't need authorization for council. Essentially, council would only receive the assets as the Municipality of Jasper and sort of close a bit of an administrative loop or system that has been useful for quite some time, but that may have now reached the end of its useful life, that being the Jasper Municipal Leasehold Assets Society. I hope that's somewhat clear. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Director Nadal. Do we have any questions from council? Councillor Frechette.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Roger. Through you to Director Nadal. So what ostensibly will happen to the society once this is accomplished? Will there be any holdings left in there, or will that be just disbanded, or what is the future for that organization?
Deputy Mayor Roger, through to Councillor Frechette. We're currently in the process of verifying with Land Titles Office that there are no hidden assets that we're unaware of that are assigned to the JMLAS. But to your point, that is the intent, is that the JMLAS would dispose of all its assets, and therefore, after that's done, could disband is the intention. we can take a bit of time just to assess and make sure that there really isn't anything else that the JMLAS needs to accomplish before we do that. But yes, that is the intention, because then all assets will functionally be transferred to the municipality of Jasper. The JMLAS will no longer hold any assets, therefore its purpose is fulfilled.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Conscript.
Just curiosity. The cottage clinic is part of that. Is the nurse's residence next to the cottage clinic? Is that part of the JMLAS, or is that owned by somebody else?
Councillor Consrud, it is not an asset of the JMLAS.
Further questions? Mayor Ireland.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Roger. I just want to deal with a process matter. From my perspective, I think that council does have to make a decision. So the assets are in the name of the Leasehold Asset Society. But in order to have a transaction, you have to have, in this case, an assignor and an assignee. The Leasehold Asset Society cannot simply transfer land to another party without that other party accepting it. And I think that council therefore has to willingly and knowingly accept the transfer, because among other things, it is the assignee that is responsible for the registration costs. And so if we're going to assume those costs, it can't be foisted upon the municipality by the Leasehold Asset Society acting to the exclusion of the municipality. So I think that the motion would have to be that committee recommend, council direct. I don't think we can. I don't think we can avoid this as a council decision. I don't think it can be a. Maybe it can be a committee direction. I struggle with it because ultimately the municipality is going to incur an expense here.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. Any other councillor have any questions? If not, I have one. And two things bother me about this. The first one is that the cost of the matter is going to be $50,000 or $60,000, I think, at least. And I don't know where it's going to end up, but I don't see that we're getting any advantage to ourselves by doing that. And the other thing is that in the legal world, it's often better to keep your money in something that doesn't have any way to get at it. And in some ways, there's an advantage to the town to have the property held by a society rather than a municipality, just for simple matters of accidents or slip and falls and things. It puts a barrier between the person that gets injured and the actual person, which is the municipality that has the asset, has the money. And I don't see any real problem with leaving things as they are indefinitely. And for an accounting point of view, the equitable interest, the real ownership, the equity in these properties is with the municipality, because we know it's held in trust by the society. And I don't see how it affects the accounting at all. I know that the accountants, the auditors want to make things simpler, but in some ways it's better to not have them as simple, because there's no direct line there between somebody that gets hurt, for example, and the municipality. And to me, it's spending this money without any real advantage. And I don't see why we can't just leave it like this indefinitely and use the money for something else. CEO Given.
Deputy Mayor Roger, I guess I would raise two points. First, I'm not sure that it can both be advantageous to the municipality to keep that distance and to say, well, we still own those assets, but we don't have a responsibility. Ultimately, we do have the responsibility no matter what. I don't think the ownership of the society provides much of a shield for the municipality from liability and risk. And if it did, the risk that I would raise for council members is that you are all directors of that society. So if there is a shifting of responsibility or burden or risk, it would probably be to the society and the directors of the society rather than the municipality. So if we're saying it shifts, some of that risk and exposure to risk and liability and keeps it away from the municipality, that may be true. The entity that it shifts it to, if it does that, which I'm not certain, and I appreciate your perspective on that from your background. If it does shift it to another entity, you are all individually, without the protections of being an elected official, directors of that society.
Yes, but we wouldn't be responsible for things such as accidents. I'm not saying it provides a 100% shield. It just makes it more complicated for somebody that's trying to make a decision as to whether they want to go after an accident, whether they do it or not. And it certainly, in my mind, the more complicated you make it for somebody like that, the better you are. So I don't see any advantage really from that point of view to doing this transfer. And the second point is, like I said, I mean, the expense to me doesn't get us anywhere. And that's my main concern here, is that it may make the bookkeeping slightly easier for somebody, but not very much. And is that worth the money we're spending? I don't think it is. Director Nadeau.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Roger. Just to give a bit of background on how we came up with under the financial section, it says approximately $35,000 to $40,000 would be the estimated land titles office fee, which could be different. So to your point, could be higher. We did engage with our municipal assessor to try to provide estimated market values on the properties that are listed in the report, understanding that they are institutional assets. So what's the value of the activity center, for example? From my perspective, it comes as a big liability for investments as well. Who would buy it, if it wasn't the municipality? But that is how we came up with the fees. And then it's also important to understand that if the transfer did go through from the JMLAS to the municipality of Jasper, then there would be another fee from the municipality of Jasper to the JMHC, which, following Mayor Ireland's point, the person who receives the assets is responsible for that. But the assets that would go to the JMHC are the smaller ones. So the activity center, for example, would remain with the municipality of Jasper. It's the leased properties like Robson House, like the property which is now land in Cabin Creek. Those are the ones that would go to the JMHC. And the JMHC requested this, wants this, would like to have the assets. Like, this is where it's coming from. In terms of the administrative burden of managing the JMLAS, it's relatively minor. It's something that we do administratively in the Legislative Services Department. So we file an annual report, and essentially there are very few meetings and very little business. So maintaining the JMLAS is not something that is super onerous for us as a municipality. So if council prefers to leave some of the assets there, it doesn't have an untoward impact on administration. But yeah, and the fees themselves, we did work with our permanent lawyers, which are our MRF, to try to determine if we could ask for a fee waiver at Land Titles Office. And upon reviewing the legislation and contacting them, there is no mechanism for them to waive the fees. We figured this would be a hurdle, and we looked into it, and there's no opportunity for a fee waiver.
Thank you. Perhaps I should clarify myself. I did it in a letter to council, but I don't have any objection to transferring some of the smaller assets to the Municipal Housing Corporation, because I realize that it'll give an advantage for them in the future for borrowing and things. My objection is simply the big assets, the activity center, if the swimming pool's involved, if the park's involved. It works out, I believe, roughly about $1,000 per million. So if you're talking 20, 30, $40 million, you're looking at $40,000. So that's where I think, and I think you're suggesting that we separate this out, transfer the smaller assets and leave the bigger ones alone. I would agree with that. I think that's the way we should go. But I just don't see the advantage of throwing $40,000, $50,000 away for basically no advantage. I don't see the advantage of putting the activity center, for example, in another name. It doesn't do anything for me.
Deputy Mayor Roger, I guess the risk and really somewhat brought on by the comments that you raised, and that's why they're not contained in the report, but is the risk that I would raise for council is that at this time, we don't currently hold director's liability insurance for the JMLAS. And so if there was a slip and fall, and I think that's the scenario that you're following under, then the natural course of action would be anybody related to the owner of that asset would be, named, and could include directors. So if council wished to maintain those assets in the JMLAS, I think an appropriate step would be to direct administration to identify the costs related to holding directors' insurance for you as individuals. You're not there as Councillor, Councillor Hall or anyone else. You're there as individuals, and that may, and again, not an issue that we've examined in any sort of depth, but if the idea is JMLAS will hold the liability and risk associated with the operation of these facilities, then the directors of that organization also hold some of that liability and risk, and we should talk about what we might need to do to ensure that you're adequately protected in those roles that none of you chose. That wouldn't be necessary if the assets were held by the municipality because you're protected in your role as a council member. So the role of a council member versus a director on a not-for-profit board is a bit different. And so the protections that you enjoy here for the decisions and operations of the municipality are not the same as you don't hold those same protections as directors of the JMLAS.
Well, that's a valid point if there is any liability as the society director. I'm not sure that there is for something like an accident. But it would be good to find out from an expert in the area. Mr. Melnick.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Roger. Sorry, Deputy Mayor Roger, and through you to administration. Currently, the assets are significant assets. The Arena Fitness Center and Aquatic Center, where we've made some substantial investments and will be making additional investments in the future, are in the municipality, but in this society. Are there advantages to having those assets specifically in the municipality as opposed to a leasehold society? I do appreciate the discussion about the director's liability, and not realized that, I think maybe previous councillors over the last number of years didn't realize that there may have been some exposure that way. So from that point of view, transferring it over to the municipality would make sense and reduce the exposure to any potential liability, however that might occur. But I just wonder if there's any advantage to the municipality having the assets actually within the municipality as opposed to the society.
Deputy Mayor Roger, for Councillor Melnick, I would say that they're minimal. So really operationally, there'd be no changes to the way these facilities are operated. The municipality doesn't have the ability to borrow against assets. That's not how municipal finance works. That is a part of the discussion about, and as we've covered, about the Municipal Housing Corporation and why we would transfer some assets to the corporation. But no, the municipality can't borrow against the value of the activity center, for example, as council knows. So operationally, there'd be very few changes. And the only sort of minimal benefit I could see would be to reduce the complexity of the municipality's holdings and reduce the layers of complication that our auditors have to face annually. It's minor, admittedly, very minor. I'm not suggesting that that's a major expense or a major change, but to the extent that we can simplify municipal operations and municipal holdings, it makes that annual process a little bit easier. Again, I don't want to overstate. I'm not suggesting that it's a big savings or anything, so it's pretty minor.
Perhaps what I could suggest is that it be determined whether there is any director's liability. For example, if somebody drowns in the swimming pool, I don't see that there's any possibility that directors of the society are going to be liable. But if there is any possibility of liability, I'd like to know that. I think other directors here would like to know that as well. So perhaps this matter can be put over until that is determined. Ireland.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Roger. It's now been 30 years that these assets have been in the name of the society, and it served the purpose. The purpose at the time was not a liability-based issue. It was to protect community investment in properties from being disposed to other levels of government without our consent. So this was done at a time when the former Jasper school district held some assets. The Jasper school district was dissolved and rolled into a regional board. The hospital was in the same position. We had a local hospital board which owned some assets. And we were just on the verge of becoming an improvement district. And there was so much uncertainty about what might happen in the future. And we had a town committee at the day with Parks Canada. An improvement district was being created by the province. The local school board, the local hospital board were being regionalized, and yet all sorts of community fundraising had gone into the purchase of various assets and the improvements on those assets. So the idea was to put those into a society which could be absolutely locally controlled, so other orders of government couldn't come and take those community assets away. And that has been achieved now for 30 years. And if the cost of having had that insurance for those assets is $35,000 or $40,000, it was money, I think, well spent. But memory doesn't serve as to what the costs were when we did this originally 30 years ago. And because I have no recollection, I think it was not a topic of concern. I think we did get a waiver. And so because the JMLAS has never had any money at all, and yet it took an assignment of these leases from the school board and from the hospital board and got them registered. Don't know how we paid for that, but maybe we did. But I would like to check that out. I have just, without CAO Gibbons' authorization, Googled again and got an AI response. The minister responsible for land titles is the Minister of Service Alberta and red tape reduction. Seems to me red tape stands in our way right now. And although we have asked council, and within land titles, they can't find a way to remove the fees. I wonder whether an appeal to the minister in these circumstances might allow for a ministerial direction to land titles to waive fees. And if the fees were waived, would this be an issue at all? Would we hesitate to assign these leases to either the municipality of Jasper or to the Jasper Municipal Housing Corporation if there was no cost at all? I doubt it. So as Deputy Mayor Roger has indicated, he wants to confirm liability of directors. I think we could use the same time to see whether we could get a ministerial direction to the registrar to waive fees. I mean, there is no real transaction. This is an administrative process, and it may well be worthy of the exercise of red tape reduction and service to Albertans. So I would be happy if there is not an objection from council to write to the minister responsible and see whether we can get a waiver of those fees if we're going to take time in any event to look at director's liability.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. While you was speaking, I took the time to do a little research with Chat GPT, and there would be no liability on a director for an accident unless the director caused it personally, which is what I'd always thought. The second point is that something like a swimming pool or a activity center has no resale value, basically, and normally land is valued at their resale value. So I'm wondering, as Mayor Ireland has suggested, if an exemption could be made, because really it doesn't have a value and land titles fees are charged on value. So it seems to me we would have an argument, and if it can save us $50,000 to write a couple letters, I think we should at least explore that. Do we have any other comments? Would this be an appropriate matter to put over for a month? I don't think it's that pressing, is it?
So the Deputy Mayor Roger, for the question you asked at the end there, in terms of timelines, there is a desire from administration to ensure that the assets that we intend to transfer to the housing corporation are transferred prior to the end of the year. Each year, it causes some additional complication in terms of what is a cost of the JMHC in terms of operating and owning an asset versus what is a cost of the municipality. And so we were attempting to move forward so we could handle that for Cottage Clinic and the Cabin Creek residential lot. So we could handle that by the end of this year. So that was a desire from administration. It makes it a lot cleaner to start off 2027 having those assets clearly transferred. Yeah, so that's the only sort of timeline that administration's under. As Director Nadon said, it's sort of sat this way for 30 years. There's no, other than this part that I've identified, there's no reason that it couldn't sit that way for another period of time. In terms of process, if council wished to direct administration to do something in the intervening time, then you should make a motion to do that. Just not taking any action doesn't move the issue forward. So if council says, hey, there's something that we would like to do first, or explore or advocate or whatever, then you should have a motion to do so that that's a recorded action of council. Choosing not to do anything is, by definition, just not doing anything. No actions would be taken.
Thank you. The property that you're talking of transferring to the corporation consists of the property out in Cabin Creek and the Cottage Clinic. Is that the only two?
That's correct.
And is there any reason why it can't be transferred directly from the society to the corporation?
I've looked to Director Nadon, but no, I don't believe that there would be any reason that couldn't happen. I think we, under the approach we've been taking here is we saw this as being a little bit cleaner of just dealing with all the properties at once and then having a subsequent transaction. If the desire of the Leasehold Asset Society was to transfer some assets to a different organization rather than to the municipality, then we could do so. I know Director Nadon has discussed with legal counsel and our auditors about the right steps in terms of recognizing those transactions, and that's how we were arrived at the recommendation in the report. So she may have more on that.
Deputy Mayor Roger, the auditors recommended transferring to the municipality, then transferring to the JMHC. So we could circle back with them, and if there's specific assets that we're considering and not the entirety of the assets, that might change their position. But this was a couple of years ago. I would like to verify that again with the auditors, would be my advice. But technically, there is, as CA Given said, there is no problem transferring from an entity to another. It might create fiscal complications, but that may or may not be a factor for council.
Well, perhaps we could have a motion that those two properties be transferred at the advice of the auditors, one way or the other. And is anybody prepared to make a motion along those lines? Councillor Frechette.
I'm not prepared to make the motion, but I'm just wondering now if we're going to dismantle the assets and piecemeal transfers. Are we not potentially putting ourselves in a precedent situation? I mean, if we transfer some of the smaller assets to the housing corporation and we pay the transfer costs, does that not set a precedent for future transfers if we decide that we're going to transfer all of them down the road, activity center, etc.? It'd be very difficult to say, well, we don't mind paying for the small ones, but we don't want to pay for the big ones.
Do we have any comments on that? Director Nadeau?
Maybe getting the mayor to write a letter to the minister and try to waive the fees for the entirety of the properties would be a step that would alleviate that concern.
That sounds a good idea to me. The if it's only to the end of the year, I mean, if this waited till even October, it would be no problem meeting a deadline of 2 months to transfer properties to the housing corporation. What is our next step? Just to set this matter over for a month or two? Mayor Ireland?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Roger. I'm working on an omnibus motion. I think I've got it in 3 parts. That committee direct administration to return this item to the first committee of the whole meeting in September. That in the interim, committee direct administration to consult with our auditors regarding the potential to have an assignment of some of the leasehold assets directly to the Jasper Municipal Housing Corporation, and that committee direct the mayor to write to the minister responsible for land titles to request a waiver of transfer fees or registration fees with respect to all properties.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. Does anybody have any comments on that omnibus motion?
And if I could just speak to one point of it, with respect to speaking to the auditors about a transfer directly to the JMHC, I just raised that I think, again, we would require a resolution from JMHC to accept the transfer. So just keep that step in mind. But I think it goes, if there is a recommendation from the auditors that would be fine, that would be another step that has to be accomplished.
Any other comments? If not, hold the vote. All those in favor? Appears to be unanimous. It's carried. Does anybody need a break at this point? Perhaps we'll have a 10-minute recess until 20 after 11. We're back from our recess. We're on to item 7.4, Mayor Ireland.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Roger. Earlier this morning, I supported Councillor Waxer's motion to move agenda item 7.4 to an in-camera discussion. And I supported that on the basis that strategic priorities typically go through that sort of a process. But on reflection, I'm going to suggest that we simply refer this item, agenda item 7.4, to a council workshop to be convened through administration, so not a set date right now. But that is more consistent with the way that council typically approaches strategic direction and strategic priorities. Otherwise, if we get into an in-camera session today, we are going to have to try and guess when we're going to be done, and there are other agenda items waiting. It is a matter which I think should take council's full attention, and so I think referring it to a council strategic workshop at a later date would be a better use of everybody's time. So I'm going to make that motion now, and I appreciate that Councillor Waxer made a motion earlier to deal with it today in camera, but I think we could preempt that with a workshop approach to this important strategic decision. So again, just for clarity, my motion is that committee refer agenda item 7.4 to a council workshop to be arranged with administration.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Ireland. Does anybody have any comment on that or discussion? Councillor Waxer.
I just wanted to say that I'm in favor of that. It's in the same spirit that I made the original motion.
Could we have a vote on that? All in favor? It's unanimous and it's carried. Next item is 7.5, the 2026 Bike Park Project Plan. And that's Director Reid to speak to.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Roger, and through to Council, of course. The item before you is the 2026 Bike Park Project Plan, and the recommendation is multifold and depending on certainly one factor. So in short, one recommendation is if the Jasper Park Cycling Association is successful in getting CFEP, that the municipality would then donate $90,000 directly to the project and up to $10,000 gift in kind. Or if the CFEP's proposal or grant application is not successful, that the municipality would donate up to $125,000 in cash, up to $10,000 gifts in kind, and an up to $90,000 repayable loan. The alternatives, of course, committee could recommend council approve different values in all of those options. That committee could also recommend council approve the cash contribution to be funded differently. So, for example, through the Financial Stabilization Reserve. And that committee could also direct administration to return to a future meeting following confirmation of CFEP funding. The background: on Tuesday, June 23rd, at the Committee of the Whole meeting, after hearing a presentation on the current status of the Jasper Park Cycling Association's Bike Park Project, committee passed the following motion by Councillor Melnick, directing administration to report back with options, preferably before the end of August, which is here we are. It is also notable to reflect that the bike park does sit on land administered by the municipality and is managed and maintained in partnership with Bike Jasper, which is their sort of marketing name for the Jasper Park Cycling Association, in an F104 relationship similar to the skate park and tennis pickleball courts, and under discussion. Phase 1 of this project was completed in 2022 at a total cost of $50,000 cash and $100,000 gifts in kind from the municipality, many local businesses, hundreds of volunteer hours. That project has proven the value of having a bike park and has also shown the success of the partnership, with Bike Jasper performing most of the maintenance and repairs over the last few years. Since that June motion, administration has met several times with Bike Jasper, the short name as I mentioned, and Hoots Inc., the selected builder. The project is permitted, designed, scheduled, and Bike Jasper and Hoots are ready to go. Over the last weeks, the team has focused the project down from 2 remaining phases with the associated extra costs to a hybrid final phase that will complete the entire project this fall. The new streamlined and focused final phase will cost $368,000 as planned. And so you'll see we have 2 funding plans, as I mentioned in the recommendations. If CFEP funding is successful, The Bike Jasper has already secured $143,000 with the CFEP grant of $125,000 and then municipal cash of $90,000 and gift in kind of $10,000. That reaches the $368,000 threshold. If there's no CFEP funding, Bike Jasper again secured $143,000, the municipal cash contribution of $125,000, municipal gift in kind of $10,000, and then a repayable loan of $90,000, where Bike Jasper is confident that they will pay that off. They think within a year, but so they've asked for 18 months to pay that off. This would complete a project with a total asset value of $518,000. The municipal contribution of $100,000 to $125,000 plus the previous gifts in kind contribution would mirror the municipal support, approximately 1/3 of the asset value provided to the skate park and tennis court projects. And a backstop loan strategy was also used on the skate park project. This funding is not included in the 2026 operating or capital budgets, and Council can approve funding this project through debt. Administration would not recommend reserves be allocated to this project at this time. This approach guarantees the completion of the build this fall at a reasonable cost. And when I say reasonable, you'll see mentions like inflation and remobilization costs are part of that reasonable word. Delayed or partial funding will result in rescheduling and recosting, projected to be possibly 2 years more delay and possibly up to $200,000 more due to builder availability, remobilization, and inflation. The existing capacity of the municipality of Jasper has very few opportunities to assist this project at scale through gifts in kind. Therefore, the smaller in-kind amount reflects the municipality providing equipment that would otherwise have to be rented for this project. Bike Jasper has a current active membership of 69 youth and 228 adult. The club runs many programs every year, from Learn to Ride to elite athlete training, and has seen, and this is a quote from Bike Jasper themselves, a massive surge in unity and ambition to get back to the glory days. Bike Jasper leads weekly group rides, both mountain and road, as well as the annual bike auction, which drew in hundreds of residents and raised over $15,000 this past spring. Administration notes that in addition to the large number of residents and visitors who use the existing park and the associated increased sales for local businesses, having a more robust and varied skills park in town close to services allows users to build skills easily and safely before going out on the broader trail network. Like the skate park, the bike park is a safe space for children and youth especially to build not only skills but build community. Administration recommends proceeding with the proposed funding approach because it provides a path to complete the park in 2026 while leveraging funding already secured by Bike Jasper and, if successful, the CFEP grant. The project would complete a community recreation asset that supports youth and adult participation, provides opportunities for skill development close to town services, and builds on established partnership with Bike Jasper. Strategic relevance, there are certainly 4 strategic priorities that directly relate that recreation and cultural opportunities in our spaces to increase community connection, nurturing relationships, support local businesses, and provide and maintain core service and infrastructure that enable the visitor economy. The bike park is designed with sections that will accommodate and inspire riders on all forms of wheeled off-road bicycles, including 3- and 4-wheeled accessibility bikes. The relevant policy I mentioned before, we do have an active F104 relationship with the Bike Jasper group. And financial, the requested support from the municipality is comprised of 2 portions, possibly comprised of 2 portions. A cash contribution of up to $125,000 and potentially a repayable loan of up to $90,000 should provincial grant funding not be secured. The financial stabilization reserve is currently at nearly $2 million, and the municipal debt limit normalized is currently at $24.5 million. And the attached project plan can give you the idea that this project will fill out that space and really complete the asset with very little loss of functionality due to the hybrid model. And of course, I'm available for discussion.
Thank you, Director Reid. Do you have any questions from council? Councillor Frechette.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Roger. Director Reid, is there any time frame? When do we anticipate hearing back about the potential grant monies? Is that something that is imminent, or is this somewhere way down the road?
Deputy Mayor Rogers, through to Councillor Frechette, that is imminent. In fact, the published deadline was the beginning of August. They have said that, due to high number of applicants, that they are delayed, but we are expecting it any time.
Thank you.
Any other questions from council? Councillor Hall.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Roger, and thank you for this report. I'm very supportive of this project. My question is about the land, and you did touch on it briefly. Just for my own clarity, this site is the site identified for anything else besides this? Is the site secured? Or is there anything else contemplated for this land that completing the bike park might prevent us from doing down the road?
Deputy Mayor Roger, through to Councillor Hall, excellent question. Great point of clarity. And no, this land does not have any other use described in any of our plans to date.
Thank you. I have one question. What is your confidence level regarding the grant?
Deputy Mayor Roger, my confidence level, I am an optimistic person, and we have had success recently. In my history in other municipalities, there can be times where the funding just isn't there for every municipality to get every ask. So I could say 50-50, and it would still be a great guess. The Bike Jasper group has reached out to MLA Long to see if he could offer some either certainty or support, and we haven't heard back from that investigation yet either. But based on sort of history with this type of grant, it has a very good chance of being supported. And I can't speak more to it more than that, other than we hope.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from council? Councillor Waxer.
Sorry, not a question, but just an accolade to the Bike Jasper people. I think it's impressive that the amount of money they've been able to raise, and and how they've stayed so steadfast in ensuring that the Jasper has a bike park. So I appreciate their efforts and enthusiasm.
Thank you. Any other questions? Mayor Ireland.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Roger, through you to Director Reid. I return to Councillor Hall's question about the land, but not use, instead ownership. So you've indicated that the bike park sits on land administered by the MOJ. Can you clarify what that means and how that might differ than the lands that accommodate either the pickleball initiative that you've referenced or the skate park initiative that you've referenced?
Certainly, Deputy Mayor Rogers, through to Mayor Ireland. So this land is not a lease. It is part of our green space package. And so it doesn't have a lease in the way those other two parcels you mentioned. So when the skate park goes on the leased piece, that parcel, so it gets referenced in a different way. This is a non-leased, administered by the municipality piece of land. And I don't know if CAO Given would add anything there. I think.
And there may be others at the council table who would know the right term for that. I believe it's a license of occupation.
Thank you.
So the municipality has a license of occupation for this activity on that site, but it isn't a leased site. We don't have a lease for it.
Thank you for that. So, but a license of occupation for an activity or a license of occupation for the land. And the reason I draw the distinction is that in the past, we have been supportive of initiatives, say the skate park, and we are currently engaged in the pickleball initiative. But the money that we invest into those projects winds up as an improvement in land that is ours, although, as we heard earlier, indirectly through the Jasper Municipal Leasehold Asset Society, but still, it is an investment in something that we can claim as ours. Whereas I take it in this case, the investment is in land that is fundamentally Parks Canada's land that we have by way of an instrument that is different than a lease. It's a license of occupation subject to other terms, I take it. But when the license of occupation comes to an end, is there any possibility of renewal? What would happen to the investment long term? Would it be different than the investment in the skate park or in the pickleball courts?
Deputy Mayor Rogers, through to Mayor Ireland, for the purposes of developing like this, there isn't really a difference. If the federal government wished to take away our leases or wishes to take away the license of occupation, that is within their purview. There is in action no difference, certainly for us. And the confidence we have comes from parks also activating it in the same way. So development permits, building permits, all the environmental assessments, things like not being able to cut the trees in that bird window, like all of the things that they require of us for a lease, they require of us for the license of occupation. When we act or speak about it, it's spoken of in the same terms. So we don't have anything that says we should be concerned, especially given that the development and building permits are exactly the same as if it was a leased property.
Thank you. I have a question. What's the term of the license of occupation?
The term of the license of occupation, I do not have that in front of me. They are treated the same. So if it has a term, it will be something like 42 years. But so I don't have that answer in front of me. I expect it to be the same.
And we don't know how far into it we are. Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Roger. And I guess a bit of clarification. Since we don't have confirmation of the CFEP grant, we have two courses of action here. Does that mean that the committee is going to recommend both of them? Or how do we proceed? We can recommend both, I guess, and then hopefully by the next meeting, or when it is appropriate at a regular council meeting, once we know about the CFIP grant, then we can proceed with the appropriate recommendation. Is that how I perceive this to be handled?
Deputy Mayor Rogers, through to Councillor Melnick, our intention is that council would contemplate them both, and if you like them both, you would pass them both, and then whichever one is appropriate is the only one we can action. The way the motion is written is, if CFEF is successful, we would do this. If it isn't, we would do this other thing. So we can't do both, and we are hoping that you would give, in essence, the bike park, the bike Jasper group, the certainty that they are backed up regardless of what happens with CFEP. And it is certainly, it would be a big surprise for the process of CFEP to be affected by this decision. They are a big organization, the province, doing their own thing on their own schedule. So we do not see any risk in passing both motions. That's why they're presented here today.
And when is construction supposed to start?
Deputy Mayor Roger, that's a great question, and it will start in September. That's the thing that we are bumping up against, is that this build season, the contractor is available, the builder is available, has already booked it in. Bike Jasper believes absolutely that they will be able to pay that loan back should it be necessary. And they are running full steam ahead. The plans are that this project is happening this fall. And starting in September, there will be action on that site. I think it would be, clear to say, if council were to not support the project, they will just cut it in half and they will build what they can afford. But nobody wants to see that, because it is a large loss if we go down that path. They've worked really hard, as Councillor Waxer indicated, to get to this level of support in the community. They believe they've got it now. If we were to lose that momentum, it will affect the success of the project.
Okay, thank you. So I take it if we're going to make a motion, we're going to make both motions at the same time. Is any councillor prepared to do that? Councillor Waxer.
And I'm making a slight change to the motion, but that committee recommend council approve the following support to the Jasper Park Cycling Association to subject to confirmation of CFEP grant funding up to $90,000 cash contribution to be funded through debenture and up to $10,000 gifts in kind, and that committee recommend council approve the following support to the Jasper Park Cycling Association should CFEP grant funding not be secured or not fully funded, because it may be funded partially but not fully. Up to $125,000 cash contribution to be funded through debenture, up to $10,000 gifts in kind, and up to $90,000 in repayable loans.
Thank you. Before we vote, the only comment I've got is that we should know what the term is, just in case this license, for example, if it's only got a year to run or something, before council actually does the vote on it. So if Director Reid could bring that information to us, appreciate that. We'll have the vote. All in favor of the vote? It's unanimous. It's carried. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Roger. And I was going to raise the very matter that you just raised. And I wonder whether it needs to be a motion for direction. And I fully agree that the terms of the license of occupation are important. There are two of us at this table who have experience with a license of occupation, and they are not treated equally to a lease. And it is a concern, and there might be all sorts of goodwill at this time, but it's a concern. And I would like to just add to Deputy Mayor Rogers' comments by making a motion that committee direct administration to provide council with the terms of the license of occupation concurrent with this matter coming back to council.
Any comments on that motion? If not, can we have the vote then? All in favor? It's unanimous. It's carried. Okay, thank you, Director Reid. The next matter is 7.6 Municipal Recovery Transition Framework. We'll have Director Olthoff coming forward.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Roger and committee. The matter I bring forward to you today is, as mentioned, the Jasper Recovery Coordination Center Municipal Recovery Transition Framework. And I say municipal because, as we'll discuss, this is a transition framework specific to the operations of the municipality within the JRCC. There are 4 distinct recommendations in the RFD in front of you this morning. I'll read them out. They are that committee receive the Municipal Recovery Transition Framework for information, and that committee recommend council authorize the extension of recovery positions as described in the framework, and that committee recommend council authorize disbanding the Recovery Advisory Committee following the conclusion of the closeout process outlined in the framework, and that committee direct administration to develop a draft terms of reference for an economic development advisory committee and return to a future meeting. So a lot to unpack there, and we'll get into that. Alternatives in front of you this morning or today are also to that committee receive the framework for information and take no further action, or that committee direct administration to make amendments to the framework and return to a future meeting. Some background. August 13th, 2024, Council passed a motion to direct administration to develop draft governance and organizational structures for a recovery office and terms of reference for a recovery committee, and to establish a director of recovery position reporting to the CAO. On August 22nd of 2024, the Jasper Recovery Coordination Centre was established as a partnership between Parks Canada and the Municipality of Jasper to guide the recovery process. On September 12th, 2024, the Government of Alberta approved up to $73.14 million in DRP funding to support Jasper's recovery from the 2024 wildfire. And on July 17th of 2025, Council approved the Jasper Recovery Framework and the Jasper Recovery Coordination Centre Year 1 Progress Report. So, turning to the municipality's recovery transition framework, the purpose of this document is to guide the orderly wind down of municipal recovery operations and support the transfer of responsibilities to the Municipality of Jasper and Parks Canada's regular operational departments. As I mentioned, this document in front of you today is specific to the operations of the Municipality of Jasper and doesn't cover the full range of recovery operations included in the JRCC, which would, of course, include recovery operations of Parks Canada. There are, in essence, three factors that will determine the process of transitioning out of direct or dedicated recovery activities to more business continuity operations in the municipality. And those are that transition activities are substantially completed, and those are the transition activities described in the report, that recovery operations that cannot or should not be transitioned to either the municipality or Parks Canada's regular operations have been substantially completed, and that remaining recovery work can be completed and managed within regular organizational structures. So the sort of four objectives, again, of the transition framework are the orderly demobilization of the JRCC, compliance with legal and funding obligations, securing the transfer of data and assets, and ensuring the operational readiness of parks and the MOJ to assume responsibility for those outcomes. So, to provide just quick background on the JRCC itself, as we mentioned in the background, the JRCC was established as a partnership between Parks Canada and the Municipality of Jasper to provide centralized governance for recovery operations. And as the document lays out, that centralized governance continues to be an important component of recovery operations, managing collaboratively issue resolution, planning, execution, and achievement of recovery objectives. And the transition framework indicates that that centralized coordination at the JRCC will continue. It provides a timeline through to the end of 2028, where the JRCC will continue to function as a partnership between the MOJ and Parks Canada. The document goes through each of the core working groups that form the JRCC's operational structure, and indicates a process and indicators that would suggest an appropriate time for the wind down of each of those working groups. Some of the working groups have already been concluded. For example, debris management, an objective that has been largely achieved in recovery. That working group has disbanded, gone through a lessons learned process, documented that, and has moved on. The Economic Recovery Working Group is another that has already concluded operation, largely because its objectives were achieved and remaining activities related to economic recovery could be integrated into the Social Recovery Working Group. So again, the document goes through each of the existing working groups and indicates what accomplishments and what indicators would suggest the correct time to begin winding down, conducting lessons learned, and ending the operation of those working groups. So specifically, those are assessment against recovery objectives for each of those working groups, the dependency on centralized coordination of those ongoing objectives, and the operational readiness of the municipality and of Parks Canada to assume responsibility for whatever recovery objectives have not yet been met. The recovery transition framework also suggests or indicates a process for winding down the Recovery Advisory Committee. The recommendation in the report and in this request for decision is to begin the process of closing out the Recovery Advisory Committee in September of this year. The Recovery Advisory Committee has made meaningful contributions to recovery planning and ongoing issue resolution. The wind down of the RAC would be accompanied by providing opportunities for RAC members to engage in recovery in other forums. This would include the working groups that continue to function. Several members of the Recovery Advisory Committee also sit on JRCC working groups. There are also opportunities for those who don't sit on existing working groups to be integrated into those. There is also a recommendation in the RFD and in the transition framework to establish an Economic Development Advisory Committee under the office of the CAO. That would represent a transition from dedicated economic recovery activities to longer-term economic development as a function and focus of the municipality. So moving out of a dedicated economic recovery function into a broader and longer-term economic development function. So all of these things combined, establishing an Economic Development Advisory Committee, continuing to involve RAC members in existing working groups, inviting participation of other RAC members into working groups, would ensure that all of the current members of the Recovery Advisory Committee continue to have opportunities to engage with and participate in recovery planning and discussions. The transition framework goes on to describe a process for document management and capturing of lessons learned from recovery. That happens through each of the recovery working groups as they wind down. A very important process for the municipality of Jasper, for Parks Canada, and for communities across Canada to ensure that we capture clearly and accurately the lessons we've learned through the recovery process and document those in a way that's accessible and can inform future disaster preparedness planning, and again be an asset to communities across the country. The final sections of the report refer to staffing. Another of the recommendations in the RFD refers to the extension of several positions within the JRCC. These are positions that are funded through the Disaster Recovery Program. The transition framework provides a detailed description of each of the existing positions in the JRCC, their function, and the accomplishments and the recovery objective completion that would trigger the ending of those positions or the amalgamation of positions. There are essentially 4 pathways for each of the existing recovery positions in the JRCC under the MOJ. The first would be to conclude as planned. So, as noted, Council approved the addition of several specific recovery positions within administration. Those at that time had a specific end date to them. The first pathway would be to end those positions according to that specified end date. The second would be the amalgamation of positions. So taking multiple recovery positions, amalgamating them to a single position, reflecting reduced workloads or the accomplishment of a substantial number of recovery objectives related to those positions. The third pathway would be the extension of some positions within the JRCC. There are 11 of the 22 positions detailed in the report that are that the recommendation would be to extend, sometimes as short as 1 month, sometimes to extend as far as 2 years. And I can get into a bit more detail about each of those. And the fourth is the transition to regular operational structures. There are some positions that were established as dedicated recovery positions. but have value as continuing function as a continuing position within the municipal administration. Again, each of the positions that have been established to support recovery are detailed in Appendix A of the report, and Appendix B of the report provides a graph detailing the suggested extension, early conclusion, or amalgamation of each of these positions. So just bear with me for 1 second. So just again, returning to the recommendations in this RFD. First being to receive this transition framework for information. The second, recommending council authorize the extension of those recovery positions described in the framework. The committee recommend council authorize the disbanding of the Recovery Advisory Committee following the conclusion of closeout processes. And the committee direct administration to develop terms of reference for an Economic Development Advisory Committee and return that to a future meeting. If you turn in your agenda package to Appendix B at the end of the document, you will see the graph indicating the requested extensions for positions in the JRCC. The blue graph, the blue bars on the graph indicate the currently approved duration of those positions. The orange bars represent the requested extension of those positions. The green bar you see there represents a position that is funded outside of the DRP. That is an economic recovery coordination position that is funded through a grant from Prairies Economic Development Canada. And the dark blue bars represent positions that have been concluded ahead of their expected end date. All of these position extension requests have been submitted to the DRP, and we have received confirmation that those extensions will be approved for the coming year, and that a subsequent request for extension will be required in the spring of 2027. So we have had positive indications from the funder that these extensions will be supported with DRP funding, and so it is now to council's discretion as to whether those extensions will be formally requested and made for those positions. There's quite a lot in this transition framework. It is obviously a multifaceted operation. And again, the purpose of this framework is to lay out a clear and orderly path to winding down recovery operations. Should be said that this is not an imminent conclusion of recovery operations. We expect recovery operations to continue through to the end of 2028. That date specifically relates to the conclusion of the interim housing program. As we've discussed in these chambers before, Parks Canada has received funding to extend the interim housing program through to the spring of 2028. We will be putting in place a number of supports to assist the transition of residents out of interim housing into permanent housing in the community. And we expect that process to extend through the summer of 2028, and for the fall of 2028 to be required for the formal closeout activities, the financial reporting, and everything else associated with concluding the DRP program for Jasper's recovery. I think I'll leave it there. I imagine there are questions, and I'm, of course, very happy to address them. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Olthoff. Do we have any questions from council? Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Roger, and to Director Olthoff. Some of the extensions are, what I say, worst case scenario. In other words, extensions are meant to guarantee DRP funding, and should those extensions not be required, I take it similar to what had happened to other positions, they would be terminated early or amalgamated with other positions?
Through you, Deputy Mayor Roger, to Councillor Melnick, that's absolutely correct. And as I mentioned, the DRP has asked that we return to them with a request for further extensions beyond, the extension that is approved in principle at this point is through till September 2027 for those positions. So in the spring of 2027, we would return to the DRP. We would provide additional justification for those extensions as required, and we would assess the accomplishment of recovery objectives and all of the other criteria, the preparedness of the municipality and of Parks Canada to assume responsibility for certain objectives and determine the need for further extensions at that point. But I think your point is quite correct. That it would be a worst case scenario or a maximum extension that we're laying out in this transition framework.
Thank you.
Further questions from council? Mayor Ireland.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Roger. Through you to Director Althoff. Thank you for a really thorough report. It is as professional as any report I can imagine having seen in all my years here. It's really well done and I appreciate it. My question is, with respect to transition, you indicated that this is specific to the municipal arm and Parks is doing their own companion document. Understanding that there has been tremendous collaboration between the organizations, is it fair to assume that they are reviewing the municipal transition plan and you are reviewing theirs? Because it seems to me that part of the seamless transition is to ensure that as duties transition, say, back to the municipality from the Recovery Coordination Center, we are prepared to take that on. And similarly, Parks Canada. And that continued level of coordination seems to me to be fundamental to this. And so I'm just curious about the overlap, and you are presenting a plan for the municipal arm. I want to hear assurance that it is fully coordinated with whatever Parks Canada is doing on their own side of the equation.
Through you, Deputy Mayor Roger, to Mayor Ireland. First, thank you for the compliments. And also, I would just say that I agree with you entirely that that level of coordination is critical to us going forward. To this point, when we've brought forward things like the recovery framework, progress reports for both year 1 and 2, we have gone through a parallel approvals process that has, in essence, begun with Parks Canada. We've gone through the Parks Canada approval process and then brought a document forward to Council that is fully approved by Parks Canada and ready for Council's review. In this case, we're taking a slightly different tact, where we are bringing forward a transition framework specific to the municipal operation. And as you've quite correctly presumed, Parks Canada is doing the same thing in parallel. Our intention is to take those two agency-specific transition frameworks and amalgamate them once they've been through the approval processes in both agencies. So what we could expect if this report is approved and goes through, that process is happening in parallel at Parks Canada. We will take those two reports and combine them into an overall JRCC transition framework that will spell out what would happen and what will happen in both agencies in terms of those ending of positions, in terms of concluding certain recovery objectives and transferring other objectives either to the municipality of Jasper or to Parks Canada as is appropriate. So we would expect that level of coordination to continue throughout the period laid out in this report, which is through to the end of 2028, at which point we will have achieved either the conclusion of recovery or the achievement of recovery objectives or the successful transition of those objectives to the appropriate agency. But the simple answer to your question, I think, is that yes, these two processes are happening in parallel, with a Parks Canada transition report going through their processes, a municipal transition framework going now through our processes, and the end result will be an amalgamated or combined document outlining the overall transition plan for the JRCC.
Thank you very much for that. I'll just say, and as a side, that although it is the Jasper Recovery Coordination Center, in my mind, it has always been the Joint Recovery Coordination Center, just a continuation of unified command. So I'm happy to hear that response. My other question is with respect to the last closeout date. as I was able to read in the report, seems to be the end of December 2028. Does that signal something to the community that we have to communicate carefully? And so we can close out various of the aspects of the JRCC without necessarily signaling that recovery is over, because it seems to me that it won't be. And I just want to be careful with that level of communication and how you're prepared for that.
Through you again, Deputy Mayor Roger, to Mayor Ireland. Again, absolutely correct. And I think if we go back to the recovery framework and a particular table in that framework that shows phases of recovery, we can see that we've passed through an acute phase of recovery. And we are now in an ongoing phase of recovery. And the long-term recovery is suggested to be roughly a decade-long process. The JRCC, as you rightly point out, is a continuation of joint command. And the transition framework indicates when the requirement or the need for that joint level of command or coordination will be ending, and what indicators or triggers will suggest the appropriate time to end that joint operation. It doesn't mean at all that recovery is complete. And I think you're quite right that communicating that clearly to the community will be an important step for us. What this transition framework is specifically referring to is the transition out of that joint coordination of recovery between the municipality and Parks Canada.
Again, thank you very much, and thanks for the report.
I have a couple of questions. The first one is, as you see from the graph, September 30th, 27 seems to be the end of most of the positions that are originally planned. How far in advance of that are you going to know if you're going to get funds to extend the jobs that are put in yellow here?
Thank you for the question, Deputy Mayor Roger. So the September 2027 date as a starting point represents the regular conclusion of the DRP program. It was originally established as a 2-year program with a 1-year extension. Our communications with our colleagues in the Alberta government have indicated that an additional extension will be very likely, that this is sort of a regular occurrence in these types of operations. And so we have had informally strong suggestions that those requirements or those extensions will be given so long as they're justified, and they can be, and that justification can be provided. We would expect to provide that justification in a memo to the DRP in the spring of 2027, and to have formal approval of those extension requests by the summer, so that we can provide ample time to those employees and to indicate that their positions will be extended. Our ongoing relationship with the DRP is a strong one, and we have had great lines of communication, so we would expect that timeline to hold. So to make the request in the spring and to have confirmation by the summer of 2027.
You would expect, for example, to have a couple of months. If we have to decide whether we're going to refund any jobs or see if Parks Canada would take them off, we'd have a couple of months to make those decisions, in your expectation.
Yes, Deputy Mayor Roger, that would be our expectation. Our communication with the DRP is ongoing. So if there are expected changes, we would hope to be aware. If there's a change in the need for capacity at the JRCC on the municipal side, we would be in conversation with the DRP about that. If there's a change in their willingness or interest in extending positions, we would hope that we would be made aware of that before the formal request came forward. But at the very least, we would expect to have several months to make those plans if necessary.
Thank you. Do you have any other questions for Director Olthoff? Councillor Hall.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Roger. No questions, but I just wanted to also thank Director Olthoff for this report. It's excellent. I agree with Mayor Ireland. I think taking something as enormous and complicated as Jasper's recovery and mapping it out is no small task. So thank you very much for that. As the chair of the Recovery Advisory Committee, I'm very comfortable supporting the recommendation to wind that committee down. I think it was created in a particular moment in our recovery where we needed a broad table of voices to help identify things that were emerging at the time. I think it served its purpose very well. I'm really grateful for everybody that was on that committee for their time and perspective. And I don't think ending that means recovery is over. I just think it means it's changing. And I also really appreciate the lessons learned piece. I think that we've learned an extraordinary amount through this experience, and sharing that knowledge that's very valuable to us, but I think will be very valuable to other communities that may find themselves in the same position. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or discussions? Councillor Melnick?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Roger. And I did want to just ask a question about the involvement of the Canadian Red Cross. I see in the recovery outreach workers section that 2 of the workers will transition to the municipality of Jasper's Community Development Department. And also the housing manager, if I saw that right, was transitioned to the recovery project manager. Is it related to the interim housing has transitioned to your office? Do I have that right?
Through you, Deputy Mayor Roger, to Councillor Melnick. So a few moving pieces there. Maybe take them in reverse order. The Recovery Projects Manager position is a position that relates to a range of recovery projects, including the establishment of in-town interim housing, including the ongoing utility servicing work happening in various neighborhoods. That position has been within the JRCC on the municipal side from the outset and will continue as indicated in the report. The recovery outreach positions are funded through the DRP. So they are not Red Cross funded positions. One of those positions, as is detailed in the report, is scheduled to end at the end of this year. There is no request to extend that position. The other, there is a request to extend that position and to transfer that position from the Community Development Department to the JRCC. And that is specifically so that that position can play a key role in supporting transitions out of interim housing. We see that as being a major component of recovery operations over the coming 2 years to provide adequate supports in terms of planning, in terms of putting programmatic supports in so that folks living in interim housing can make strong plans for moving into permanent housing in the community. So we will extend one of those positions and transfer it into the JRCC to work more closely with our recovery operations. The Red Cross's involvement in recovery is quite independent of this transition framework. Typically, the Red Cross stays involved in large-scale disaster recoveries for a longer period of time. There is, for example, continuing Red Cross activities in Fort McMurray, now 10 years after that incident. So we value very highly the partnership of the Red Cross in recovery operations, and we'll continue working closely with them throughout the continuation of the JRCC and likely beyond as the municipality continues supporting recovery over the longer term.
Thank you for that. And just to reconfirm, the Red Cross is managing the transition of people in and out of the interim housing?
Through you, Deputy Mayor Roger, to Councillor Melnick, the Red Cross's role in interim housing is specific to property management. They are essentially the landlord. So when it comes to assisting people in planning, in addressing whatever challenges they may face in transitioning out of interim housing, that is not specifically a role for the Red Cross's property management function. As we move forward with developing and implementing programs and case managed supports for people in interim housing, the Red Cross will certainly be involved. We will co-develop the programming with them and implement it in partnership with them. So while we will have a social recovery coordinator position in the JRCC, as well as a recovery outreach position in the JRCC that are quite focused on supporting transition out of interim housing, we will also work with the Red Cross and their case management supporters in making sure that people have access to the support and guidance they need to make those transitions.
Thank you. I think the interim housing portion of the next 2 years is really critical. And I take it that this is also including Marmot Meadows in that, or is that a separate housing, interim housing activity, just for clarity in my own mind.
Through you, Deputy Mayor Roger, to Councillor Melnick. The Marmot Meadows housing site is part of the overall interim housing site. So when it comes to providing support to residents, that program will apply equally to all of the interim housing sites. Where there will be some difference is in the physical demobilization of the interim housing units and the site restoration, where Parks Canada will be directly taking care of the Marmot Meadows site, and where the municipality, and again, our recovery projects manager, will have a more direct role in supporting site rehabilitation on the in-town interim housing sites.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And as I say, this is a really important part of the next 2 years, and understanding how that's going to work might help to answer some questions for individuals who are seeing things happening at both sites and maybe not fully understanding how the process is going to, how the process is planned to go for the next couple of years.
Thank you. Director Olthoff, I noticed in the recommended council motions here that there's authorization for extension of recovery positions. Do you need that from us in order to continue those positions and get DRP funding, or is that independent of us? The reason I'm asking is because if we can just receive your report for information, that'd be fine. But there's also, it seems to me, requests for authorizations, and I'm not sure whether you need that or not.
Thank you for the question, Deputy Mayor Roger. I believe there are essentially two components that we need to continue these positions. One is the funding from DRP, and the other is Council's approval to extend those positions. So I would say that, yes, indeed, we do need that decision from Council in order to move forward.
CEO Given.
Yeah, Deputy Mayor Roger, the intent here is to, like one of the previous discussions, administration has a plan. We want Council's acknowledgement of that plan and essentially authorization for that plan, appreciating that there will be other decisions yet to come. That assists us in understanding what we should be taking forward to reconcile with Parks as we build that collaborative and shared plan for JRCC going forward. We need to ensure that our governing body has said, yes, we're okay with that. And we need to be able to demonstrate to the provincial funder that our governing body, Council, has said, yes, we're okay with that. And so that's why we framed the motions the way they are, as that Council is authorizing these.
The reason I asked it is because some of the authorizations we would give for positions, I think, would depend on whether they're funded by the DRP or by us. So that might make a difference. If we have to pay for it, we might not want to authorize it. Yeah,
thanks, Deputy Mayor Roger. So in the document that's here, the assumption, well, not the assumption, it clearly illustrates which positions are expected to be funded by DRP and for the, what length of time. And so the in the graphic, the items that show the bars that are the lighter color blue are positions that Council previously approved, which are funded by DRP. Those approvals were specific, in some cases out to September 2027. There are some cases where administration has identified and pre-cleared with DRP that a position is likely to need to be continued beyond that. And I'll start with the Director of Recovery. That's the easiest. The position was originally established out till September 2027. Administration and DRP are, under the shared understanding that it's likely that position will need to continue out till December 2028. And DRP's indicated that they're likely to fund that, subject to Council authorization and actually making that request. So as a principle, administration doesn't want to assume all of these positions were established via Council motion. And so we're seeking essentially Council motion to say, yes, we approve extending those positions. The implication being that Council is accepting of the 10% share of that position going forward. So we didn't, through this entire process, we haven't established a position related to recovery without Council's authorization. In this document, we're proposing that some of those positions now need to be extended beyond what we originally discussed, and so we're coming back to Council for that authorization. There are some positions in here that you can see are ending. And as noted in the document, there's some consideration of whether some functions might need to be continued by the municipality, but outside of the recovery context. And those would be council budget discussions that would happen at the budget table.
Okay, that's very well, but you've used the word likely. So if we authorize extension of recovery positions today or recommend to council, what happens if DRP says, no, we're not going to fund it? Are we stuck or can we cancel?
Administration would return to council with that information so that you could make further decisions.
Okay, so authorizing today does not bind us.
That's correct. The assumption, the built-in part, the plan is predicated on the idea that the positions that would be extended with the support of DRP funding. If that doesn't come to pass, then administration would be obligated to come back to council to seek further direction.
Yeah, should that be added to the motion that it's dependent on DRP funding? Arlen?
Without being able to reference the particulars of that long report, I think as described, which is in the recommendation, so the extension of recovery positions as described, I think the description in the document contemplates an extension of funding. So not our funding. So I think we can rely to some extent on those two words as described.
Okay, thank you. Is there any more discussion on this matter? Mayor Ireland.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Roger. If I may, I think through you to Director Althoff, and I certainly have done this before. I think the phrase that we've exchanged is inside baseball. And I want to talk about the other authorization that is here, the third bullet of the recommendations. And I just want to get your thoughts on whether we ought to change that. I think that council would not authorize disbanding the Recovery Advisory Committee. It would simply do it. I mean, I don't know who would we be authorizing to do it. I can't remember how we established that. There must have just been a resolution to establish the Recovery Advisory Committee with the terms of reference. And I worry about words. Disbanding the Recovery Advisory Committee sounds a little bit like a focus on the members, whereas it's just the focus should be on the committee has done its work and should be dissolved or discontinued or some word like that. So unless I am missing something, I would think that committee could simply recommend that council dissolve the Recovery Advisory Committee following the conclusion of the closeout process, rather than authorizing something, because I don't know who we authorize other than ourselves.
Through you, Deputy Mayor Roger, to Mayor Ireland, I think the last clause that you just mentioned there was following the conclusion of the wind down activities or the closeout activity described in the report is the critical piece. My only concern would be the timing of the conclusion of the committee, but I think otherwise that's perfectly appropriate and probably more clear.
Perhaps I could invite Mayor Ireland to make the motion then.
If all councillors have exhausted whatever questions they have and expressed their gratitude to Director Althoff for the report, and of course credit to the JRCC for all the work that it's done, I will make a motion that committee receive the Municipal Recovery Transition Framework for information, and that committee recommend council authorize the extension of recovery positions as described in the framework, and that committee recommend council dissolve the Recovery Advisory Committee following the conclusion of the closeout process outlined in the framework, and that committee direct administration to develop a draft terms of reference for an economic development advisory committee and return to a future committee of the whole meeting.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. Any other comments? Seeing none, I ask for a vote on the motion. All in favor? It's unanimous and it's carried. Thank you, Director Oldhoff.
Thank you very much.
The next matter is 7.7, Green Burials Information Request. Councillor Waxer is to speak to that.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity to speak to this. A small number of residents have been regularly corresponding with me about the possibility of adding a green burial area to our cemetery, or to allow for natural burial within the existing cemetery. These residents are extremely passionate about this topic, especially given our location in a national park. And I'll just quickly explain the distinction that green burials require adherence to core environmental and ecological criteria established by organizations like the Green Burial Society of Canada and the Green Burial Council to ensure natural decomposition with zero environmental obstruction. There's five core criteria of no embalming, that there has to be biodegradable containers, a direct earth burial, and low impact memorials like a wooden piece that would lay on the ground, and ecological land management. For instance, using sustainable land care practices, avoiding fertilizers, pesticides, or intensive manicured landscaping. A natural burial refers to the eco-friendly method of returning a body to the earth without chemicals or concrete, while a green burial has all those other criteria. So I have a motion prepared that committee direct administration to prepare a report on the potential for adding a green burial area to the Jasper Cemetery, and or the possibility of allowing natural burial in the existing cemetery, and return with that report to a future committee of the whole meeting.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Waxer. Any comments or discussion on that? Councillor Frechette.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Roger. Yes, just a comment. I too have heard from different members of our community about the prospect of a natural green burial. I certainly don't know much or really anything about it, but I would certainly be interested in finding out what's all involved. And it's hard to imagine that there would be too many hoops and ladders, but you never know. It is a national park. I think that could be something that we don't know about. But there is no question there are people in our community that have got a passion for that process. So definitely I'd be interested to hear for information what exactly is involved so we can make an informed decision on it. Thank you.
Any other comments? I forget, did you make the motion already?
I did.
Okay. All in favor of the motion? Oh, I'm sorry.
There.
Mayor Ireland.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Roger. Councillor Waxer presented information and then jumped straight to a motion. So I hesitate to drag administration in because we are technically in debate, but the motion is to direct administration to do some work. And I would like to know whether administration has any opportunity or has had any opportunity to even consider what sort of staff capacity this is going to take at a time when we are engaged in all sorts of other things. We just heard from the director of recovery about the transition framework. We've got budget coming up. There are all sorts of things. There's this brand new protection of privacy legislation that staff have to get up to speed on. That's going to be a capacity issue. And while I absolutely recognize and respect the interest of residents in sorting out this green burial question, I recognize too that our staff is under tremendous pressure, and I want to have clear expectations of what it is we want and when we want it, and when our staff can turn their attention to this particular matter. I have no idea what sort of research might be required. I agree that to the extent it's an environmental issue, it's a Parks Canada issue, so that means coordinating with them. But overall, it is a capacity issue, and I would like to hear from CAO Given whether he needs any time to figure out what resources he can put towards this question at this time.
Deputy Mayor Roger. So first, and just, oh darn, he's left. I was just going to say, thankfully, the Director of Recovery isn't also responsible for the operation of the cemetery. So, I say that lightheartedly. We have the municipal administration team where lots of people, different people are doing different things at the same time. I like to make the point, because I think that this is sometimes lost for the public. We can, in fact, walk and chew bubble gum at the same time. We're capable of dealing with multiple independent issues. So, and anything that's discussed at the council table, you've all probably been familiar with this. People will say, well, why is council discussing that? Well, that's one of the things council discussed and one of the things administration is working on. More specific to Mayor Ireland's request, we have a team, the operation of the cemetery and all the legal aspects of that. We have a staff member that's a part of their specific job duties is overseeing the cemetery. And so we would ask them, what their capacity is. And that's the type of conversation when an issue is raised by a council member. It goes into administration. The next thing that you would see happen is us come back with that on a motion action list, which would give an indication of our expected timeline for returning to council. Typically, I think in the past, and maybe this was with past council, but we had a sort of a tacit understanding that a typical expected timeline for a return with information on a completely new topic should typically be about 3 months. So general expectation, completely new topic, we would expect probably in the next 3 months, we'd be able to get that back. And I feel relatively confident being able to say that because this is a known issue that members of the public have raised to administration. And because we have staff that are specifically tasked with thinking about the operations of the cemetery. So I suspect that they're likely largely familiar with it. And if it's just a matter of documenting this in the form of a council report, I don't think that's too high a burden, but the general expectation for a new topic would be 3 months.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that. I just wanted to comment, if I may, that I think we ask an awful lot more of administration than to walk and chew gum at the same time. I think we ask them to run, to chew gum, to whistle, to dance, to juggle, to be clairvoyant, all at the same time, and they do it all. So I appreciate the response CAO given.
Okay, perhaps Councillor Waxer.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Roger, through you to the mayor. I appreciate the concern for that, and that was why I deliberately left it open-ended. So I appreciate the fact that this will require significant time, but it feels like this conversation keeps emerging in the community and people are speculating why it isn't moving forward. And I just thought it was important to sort of finally have a clear answer as a councillor to address those community concerns.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? No? Well, the motion's been read. All in favor? Appears to be unanimous. Carried. The next one is the motion action list. CEO Given.
Thanks very much, Deputy Mayor Roger. In line with our conversation about municipal capacity and how we return to council with items. So a few quick comments. First, I'd suggest the Indigenous relations framework that was brought forward today. Council's directed it somewhere else, and so I'd suggest that this item could be removed. It will be replaced by the direction from council to establish a workshop. The Recovery Advisory Committee terms of reference back in November of last year, there was direction to think about potential amendments. The motion today is recommending disbanding the Recovery Advisory Committee. So I'd suggest that that item could be deleted. The Canada Day report, you'll see, was currently listed for August. This is our last August meeting, so we'd suggest that it should be adjusted to September. That report is in draft form. And the Jasper Park Cycling Association item on the second page was delivered today, and so that could be struck from the list. And then at the bottom of the list, you'll see that administration is recommending deferring the residential parking item to September. This is a reflection that some of the members of our UDS department are away on vacation over the end of the summer here. So expect to be able to bring that forward in September. Those would be the adjustments administration would recommend to council for consideration of updates to the motion action list.
Okay, thank you. Any comments or discussion on that? If not, if somebody could make the motion. Councillor Melnick.
Thank you. I would move that the motion action list, the committee approve the modifications of the updated motion action list as detailed by CEO Given.
Thank you. No further discussion. All in favor? Appears to be unanimous. It's carried. The next matter is number 9, Councillor upcoming meetings. Perhaps if anybody has any upcoming meetings they want to address. Councillor Frechette.
Yes, I'll be meeting with my board of the Community in Bloom to finalize the provincial judging for the 10th of September.
Anybody else? Appears not. Okay. Number 10 is upcoming events. Communities in Bloom is the first one. Does Councillor Frechette have anything to say about that?
Only that we will be having a full day on the 10th with the provincial judges in town and with a get-together at Earl's that evening. Hopefully all of the council and mayor and other dignitaries will be able to attend. This should be a great full day and getting us back into the Community in Bloom spotlight. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll just read for the benefit of the public the other upcoming events. There's the Jasper Folk Music Festival, September 11th and 12th at Commemoration Park. There's a NETMA between 4:30 and 6:30 on September 16th at the Silverwater Restaurant at the Chateau Jasper. There's the Alberta Municipalities Convention, September 23rd and 25th, Edmonton Convention Center that the council will be going to. And there's a Library and Cultural Center anniversary between 6 and 9 p.m. October 2nd at the Jasper Library and Cultural Center. The last matter is the adjournment. Anybody want to make that? Mayor Ireland.
There being no further business, I move that Committee of the Whole adjourn at 12:43 p.m.
Thank you. All in favor? Appears to be unanimous. That's carried. Thank you very much.